I'm chatting with Professor Beatrice Ekanjume, the acting Pro-Vice-Chancellor of the National University of Lesotho. I want to find out how that country has responded to COVID-19 and how the university is coping with this challenge. Beatrice, lovely to chat with you. Thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure, Ellen.
I want to find out, I can tell by the way you're dressed, it's obviously cold in Lesotho at the moment. Are you in the middle of winter?
Yes, we are in the middle of winter and it has been very cold these past days. When COVID-19 came, you can imagine Lesotho being a poor country. We were very concerned because we knew if it gets here, it will be really difficult for the nation to survive. Student population of close to 10,000 and about 4,000 are on campus. They live on campus, but of course, all of the 10,000 come to campus for various activities. So I don't know if I should say fortunately, when the news of the COVID-19 came, we were on a short break. So our students were out of campus and only the staff members were on campus. So when the government of Lesotho decided to take precautionary measures to make sure that we try to curb this pandemic and that it doesn't hit Lesotho so hard, there was a national lockdown that was declared. And since our students were away, what we did, in fact, they were supposed to return the same week when the lockdown was announced. So what we did was to tell them to stay put where they are. They don't have to move because the university was going to respect the national lockdown. So the students stayed put, and the staff was also advised to go and stay at home.
Would they all have laptops? Would it be easy to set them up at a distance?
It was a big challenge when we made that decision. Our hope was that the COVID thing will be contained immediately and that we will get back to work and try to catch up with the lost time, because the government announced a 3 weeks lockdown, an initial 3 weeks lockdown. And so we thought, okay, 3 weeks, let's see if things are contained and the students come back after 3 weeks, we can make a recovery plan and see how we recover the lost time. But obviously, then the next, just a few days after that announcement, we realized that it wasn't going to be possible for things to return to normal in 3 weeks. And so as management, we had to already start making plans to see how we can address the situation. Obviously, we had to talk to students, talk to the staff who were all away, make them aware that the COVID situation in the world, as much as it had not yet hit Lesotho, but what was happening around the world was evident that there is nothing good coming in the few days or weeks or months. So we had to engage with the stakeholders, students and staff, and make them aware that we need alternative ways of carrying out our core business of teaching and learning. We had to engage our stakeholders, staff and students, to make them aware that we have to go online because that was the only feasible option for us. Not all our students have laptops. Yeah, many of them don't have laptops. Yes, they have smartphones, but again, Lesotho being a poor country, some of them may have the smartphones, but they may not even have access to internet where they live. That was one of the main challenge that we had. Students who are living in rural areas, remember, they had gone home, so they were in their homes. And some of them were living in areas where there is no electricity, and therefore they can't have access to the internet. And that was a major challenge for us. As management, we had to think out of the box. First, going online will mean the student will need access to internet, and knowing that they don't have the finances, we had to make sure that they have this access free. So we negotiated with the telecommunication companies in Lesotho, 2 of them, to see how we can get our various portals given a 0 rating for the students and staff, of course at the cost of the universities. Also the university will incur the cost, and then the students and staff will be able to access those various university or online websites free. So we made that negotiation. And then the challenge of those students who are staying in places where, for instance, there is no electricity, and even in some places where there is electricity, the network coverage of the communications networks that they have don't get to those areas. So what we did was to give to make a special dispensation for such students. So once they are identified, we allow them to come and stay in their rooms on campus, but under strict COVID regulations. So there is no face-to-face teaching going on. Now for putting the material online, it was really a challenge, and it is still a challenge because, like you rightly said, we were using a purely face-to-face mode, and now going fully online was not an easy task. Fortunately, we already had the online learning management system in place since 2015. Some lecturers have been using it, but because it wasn't our main mode of learning and teaching, many people were still, of course, focused on the face-to-face. So those who had not paid attention to it in the past had difficulties. We had to train them, and training them visually was not easy. After a time, we realized that we could do the trainings here on campus, but of course, while trying to maintain and observe the guidelines for COVID. So it has been a challenge. The training is actually still going on, and although there was resistance at the beginning from both staff and students, which was understandable, now everybody is on board. And I think both the staff and the students are beginning to enjoy this new mode. Yeah. Fortunately enough, before, like I told you, our students were on break, or the university was on a short break. Fortunately, before that short break, more than about 70% of what had to be covered for the semester had been covered. Right now, mostly what the lecturers are doing are to provide the students with the remaining part of the syllabus online. So it's mostly putting the material there, and then they interact through chats, but excuse me, not necessarily through lecturing online. It's mostly they put the material there, the student asks questions, they respond to the questions and concerns of the students. So they have that interaction. We are going to have take-home exams. The exams will not be the normal formal kind of exams that we usually have. It will be mainly take-home exams, except for those technical or professional courses where exams will be designed differently. And again, because like I said, more than 70% of the work had been done before we had the short break, or before this COVID thing came in. So most lecturers also had given about 3/4 of the assessment that was supposed to be given to the students. So it's going to be more or less a continuous assessment kind of thing for those who think they need more assessment. Then they will give the take-home exams. Initially, like I said, there was resistance. They didn't want to. They actually told us they don't want to learn online. And so that resistance was there, but we kept talking to them and explaining to them and making them understand that we are looking for, an alternative for them, because we don't want them to be stuck. So, and we don't want them to remain stagnant. Meanwhile, in the rest of the world, students are being taught online and they are progressing. So we want them to progress. So I think gradually they began to understand that this was not something that is benefiting any other person than themselves. And they realize that, no, they need to progress. They don't want to stay on the spot. They want to move. They want to graduate and all of that. And so they bought into the idea. Initially, yes, there were issues, there were problems, and then we were solving them together. The good thing is we worked together with the students. They worked together with us. If it has to come to that level where come August, September, the things are still the way they are and we are not able to bring students on campus, then we should be able to provide them tuition wherever they are without the challenges that we are facing now. Yeah, I think as a university, it is our responsibility to provide education, to provide tuition in all areas. And we will continue to do that. In fact, we're discussing with the Director of Human Resources to say one of the major requirements of employing academic staff now will be your skills in technology. It's true that COVID brought this challenge, but I think to an extent it is a good challenge because it is taking us where, of course, the fourth industrial revolution and the fifth that is already on the way are leading the world to. So I think it's a good thing that we were forced to move into e-learning. I would say the most difficult one was changing the mindset of the stakeholders. So I was one who had to, negotiate. I really called it negotiation because it wasn't an easy task. I had to, do everything that I could to really convince these students that this is where we have to go. We don't have a choice. And it took me time and energy to do that. I won't tell you a lie. The resistance was really, really tough. We have to make provision for, different things. No matter how something can be working for you, no matter how you are getting the best results that you think you are getting from something, always think outside the box and make provision for, in case this was no longer the situation, what will be my next step? This is working for me now, yes, but in case it didn't work for me, what is it that I would have done? And you already put that in place so that when that happens, you have a backup. So like I was saying, we already had the learning management system, but we were not using it and we were not making staff aware that this is something they must use. If we had made it maybe mandatory that maybe about 30% of the teaching and learning activities should be done through the learning management system and made it compulsory for staff and students, everybody would have been used to the system before this pandemic came. And it wouldn't have been so difficult, one, to convince them to go there, and two, to train them to use it, because they would have already known.
Well, I have to tell you, Beatrice, that's good advice for any university, but it's good advice for any business too. Thank you for joining me today. I thoroughly enjoyed that chat. There were 3 key takeaways from that interview: adaptability, contextualization, and stakeholder communication. Adaptability was about the fact that Beatrice pointed out they already had an LMS system. They had a platform in place which could deliver online learning, but staff didn't use it. She said that if they had insisted that 30% of all courses would be delivered using the LMS, then staff would have been fully up to speed when this pandemic struck. As it was, they needed to train the staff to use the platform first. The second was about contextualising the problem and overcoming the fact that students thought that perhaps this was just an issue for the university or just an issue for the country of Lesotho, and actually spending time contextualising it and explaining that this was a worldwide pandemic. This was not local to the university or the country. This had a global reach and therefore needed a response which would take that into account. And the third area was changing the mindset of students. Students were very reluctant to study online. They weren't fond of it. They wanted to come back into campus. They wanted the experience of being taught face to face. She needed to convince them that everything that they were doing in terms of providing online learning was actually in the best interests of the students. And that was a huge communications challenge. And just as a matter of interest, wasn't it fascinating that they found 50 students who had no access to the internet, no access to electricity, no way of continuing their studies. And the way they found around it was to bring them onto campus and provide them with living quarters so that they would actually have access to the internet and could therefore continue their studies. A fascinating interview. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Essential online training solutions for communications professionals. The PR Training Academy.